Just about 15 minutes after the hour of 7 o'clock, welcome back to the Now Morning Show. And we are wrapping up the 2023 local government elections, of course, unpacking that 7-7 deadlock that we would have seen at the polls yesterday. And so joining me this morning to talk more about it, we have the Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister with responsibility for communications, the Honorable Simon de Nobrega. Minister, good morning.
Morning, Kimberly. Morning to your viewers. Morning to your DJ, your 23-year-old DJ.
You can wish him happy birthday as well, Minister.
Happy birthday to you as well, DJ. I'm talking about 23, the ripe old age of 23. My word.
And Minister, I want to switch gears because, first of all, thank you for coming. I know that we would have seen you at the Balisé House last night when the preliminary results came out. And so to have you here this morning, it really is a pleasure. I want to start off right there, though. Initial thoughts, of course, these are the preliminary results. We're still waiting for the official from EBC, but we have that 7-7 deadlock. From what we're seeing, the PNM and the opposition have both been able to retain their seats. Initial thoughts coming out of that?
I think that that it is, of course, we know that everyone is going to claim victory. However, I think that 7-7 is a continuation of the status quo. Of course, I would have liked, I think we would all have liked to see 8-6, 9-5, but it is a continuation of the status quo, and more importantly, it says that even if it did not result in overall victories in non-PNM held corporations, it does say that our message of reform was heard, and quite frankly, I am looking forward now to putting the back and forth and the campaigning for an election behind and focusing on delivery of reform.
Yeah. Minister, before we get to the reform conversation, though, let's talk about what we saw last night. For example, the PNM, they were able to make some inroads because they got that Lengua Indian Walk, they got that area. But also, too, on the opposition side, the UNC was able to get something in San Fernando. How are we looking at those movements that we're seeing happening in those districts?
Well, Kimberly, I mean, the first thing is to acknowledge that these are the preliminary results. I know that we do have 1 or 2 recounts that will be had. And so I think the focus is really on letting that happen. But it is to move on from the election. Look at where we have won. Look at where there may have been inroads. I mean, even in Diego Martin Central, when you drill down, particularly in of course the seats in the districts that are in my constituency, seeing those polling divisions that did not perform in the way that we were accustomed to them performing, we have not seen, at least the numbers that I have seen, have not really shown any significant uptick in a vote that it was against the PNM. It did show a drop in the votes for the government, and I think that is really reflective of one, an incumbent government that has the responsibility of delivery, and of course, when you sit outside of that, without the responsibility of delivery, it's very easy to point fingers at, well, this has not happened and that has not happened. But more importantly, I think that local government again and local government elections again showed a poor turnout simply because people acknowledge that local government in terms of delivery simply does not work. We agree with them. We agree that it does not work, which is why we have made local government reform such an important pillar of our term in office and our delivery of governance to the citizen in their daily lives. And I think part of it is also a wait and see. Let us see how local government reform delivers to the population, and I hope that having seen that in 4 years, we will see a significant uptick in the general participation in local government elections, and of course, support for the government in 4 years.
Yeah. Minister, from a communications perspective, do you think more could have been done on the government side to inform the public about what local government reform is? Because for example, if there was more time, do you think that the government could have built maybe a stronger platform for the citizens to understand the importance of local government reform, and maybe that would have encouraged more people to come out at the polls?
Listen, you always want more time. You always look back and say, well, maybe I could have done this better, maybe I could have done that better. That is part of any campaign. It is part of any government's daily operations, continually looking back to learn lessons. But you've asked a question that I think was posed to the Prime Minister last night as well. And his answer was that it was not for lack of trying. We have, after the reform package was put forward and accepted, the government went about the business of trying to inform corporations. What is reform going to mean to you? Now, this was after lengthy consultations across all the corporations, and us having seen support, overwhelming support, for reform across all the corporations. I'm sure your viewers and Kimberly, even you, would have seen people like MP Hussein and Chairman Awong speaking about their support for local government reform. When we went to the corporations post, unfortunately, there was a message sent to the councillors and aldermen of UNC-controlled corporations that they were not to attend. So they were not able to benefit from that conversation as to how reform can be rolled out, and more importantly, how reform can be utilized in the package that it is in, through the legislation, how this can be utilized to better serve your constituents. I think when we went into the campaign, we took a position, the Prime Minister, also as our political leader, took the position that we were going to move away from the usual rab that occurs on a political hustling, and we would focus on a conversation based on local government issues and local government reform. That did not happen in other places, and of course it became more a campaign of no, as opposed, say no, as opposed to saying yes to something that would genuinely benefit you and me and your viewers, every citizen, in their daily lives, because you're going to have a corporation that is equipped, resourced, and has the authority to match the responsibility of representation at the local government level. So while I think, yes, sure, we would have loved more time, I do think the population would have liked extremely long election season, especially given what was happening on other platforms. I think that there was support for the way we conducted ourselves, and I think that we went about trying our best to inform the population as to what reform actually means, how reform will be implemented, how it will be empowered, and now it is about doing it.
So that was my other question. So where are we now with local government reform?
Well, you would remember that our original intention was, through the extension of the lives of the political duration of the then councillors from 3 to 4 years, the intention was to take the time that we would have had to actually implement the different parts of the legislation.
Right.
Of course, that did not happen, and part of the time has had to be spent in campaigns and now it is about implementing in the shortest possible time. We were looking in the original incarnation, of course, of a end of the year into early 2024. I cannot say because that is the domain of the Attorney General. But what I can tell you is that we are going to be aggressively pursuing the implementation of local government reform, because we have councillors across this country, 141, that deserve to be empowered. We have 14 corporations that deserve to have the ability to deliver in a real way, to be able to positively impact in quick time the lives of their burgesses, their residents, and their citizens.
Yeah. Minister, I know one of the things you may have heard, and people say it all the time, is that local government election is normally a sign moving into the elections. The Prime Minister was very cautious last night. He said, listen, he said, yes, when that time for election comes, we will fight it vigorously. But is there any concern in the party? Are we looking at anything right now as it relates to general in 2025?
So it is interesting that you've raised that, and you're right, it has been said, because I was on another interview panel this morning, and that was raised.
Yeah.
We focus so much in this country, at least from a political conversation, on moving from election to election. We see people going into accommodations, coalitions, all with the focus of winning an election. And inevitably, history will show that being the focus never bodes well for the citizens. The PNM has taken a position that we are not going to be running our business looking at an election. We are in government. We are concerned about governance. When an election is called, an election is to be won. An election has been called. We have come to the end of it. The status quo is maintained. There have been some shifts. We do have some recounts that are going to be in place. We are particularly happy, as the Prime Minister said, that the message of the government was received in a typical UNC stronghold in Princestown. And so we go about now, moving on from that, into the business of governance. Yeah. And when the 2025 election comes about, we will fight that election, and we will move towards winning that election as well.
Yeah, Minister, while the focus, of course, is on governance, one of the things we saw coming out of this election is that coalition. We've had a coalition party in government already. Is there any concern in the government's camp as it relates to that coalition that was formed to try to get some of the seats or even to retain the ones in the strongholds?
No, I should not speak. I shouldn't say no on behalf of the government. For me particularly, no. Yeah. We need to remember what happens when you simply put together a coalition to fight an election. I think it was on TT just last night, in one of the early panels that a representative of the NTA was on, and in that conversation, you saw cracks already. You're seeing a difference of opinion on fundamental issues, and I think it's, if I'm not, of course, I was listening all and over. Moving, yes, and yes, right. Yes. But it with regards to the opposition leader and the UNC's position on stand your ground legislation that we vehemently oppose. So even in there, I mean, and again, look back at what has happened with coalition governments and their ability, one, to deliver, two, to last. They have not been successful. So we move ahead. We ask the opposition to accept their role as a responsible opposition. They have a role in governance. They have a role in leadership in this party, in this country. We ask them to accept that role as we did when we were in opposition, and let us get about the business of the country. This election to election approach does nothing does nothing for advancing us as a nation. We want to focus. Now, this conversation is about reform. We want to focus on delivery, and we want to focus on the business of making sure that the average citizen is positively impacted in their daily lives.
Minister, my final question for you, especially given that 7-7 deadlock that we would have seen, a lot of people have been talking about, or they've restarted the conversation about tribal politics in terms of how people vote for their tribe. It seems to be very evident, given how the map was split last night. Any concerns about how voters are choosing who they put their X by, where they go, and they cast their vote?
I think that's a very pressing conversation and topic, and we can probably spend another 20 minutes on that alone.
Yes.
Globally, we are seeing polarization.
Yeah.
Globally, you look at a map in the U.S. and you have red states and blue states. Of course, Trinidad can never be described as a homogeneous society, and I suppose at the very base there may be some sort of tribalism. I do not think that the PNM has ever projected that, and even when it has reared its head, the party has taken a position that that is not what we are about. We are a national party. We have put forward, in terms of this local government election, a national solution to delivery, regardless of corporations, regardless of what tribe you may belong to, regardless of where you live, where you vote, where you work. Local government reform is not going to be ruled out in PNM corporations. Local government reform also gives a level of protection to minority partners in corporations where you have more than one party in power, because it says that certain key committees must be chaired by a minority chairman. So we are about, again, delivery, and we are about a national solution that is not geared towards a perception of tribal politics. I can tell you that if I had for 1 second thought that that is what the PNM was about, I would not have found them to be reflective of my own personal ethics, my own approach to life. So it is not the PNM that I know. It is not the PNM that I project. It is not the PNM that I see in my colleagues, nor in the persons I interact with on a daily basis.
Well, Minister, thank you again for coming. Hope you got some rest.
I hope so too. It doesn't look that way, though.
But thanks again for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you, everyone.
Of course. And that was the Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister with responsibility for communications, the Honorable Simon de Norberger, just unpacking the recently concluded 2023 local government elections and keeping his finger on the pulse of a local government reform. You're on the Now Morning Show. We're going to take a break and be right back. Stay with us.